Today we'd like to talk to you about investing in property and property as an investment tool as opposed to just a place to live. We'd like to talk about raising capital for your investment opportunity. We are going to talk about a structure for your business. We are also going to talk about how you protect yourself in terms of the structure itself, building a trust, and also a company as the tool to invest into your property portfolio. Now, you may think that you do not have the capital or the income availability in order to build this property opportunity or property development for yourself, but I'm here today to tell you otherwise. We have helped a number of individuals through our organization to get involved in the property sector without any of their own capital. We've helped them structure their deals, we've helped them find deals, and we've helped them find finance for themselves. We ourselves do not do any funding as the Enterprise Development Property Fund, but we do educate in our academy. So just very briefly, the Enterprise Development Property Fund is an academy that supports historically disadvantaged individuals, and we help them to build their property portfolio. We run through a 3-year program where we teach them 14 different disciplines on getting involved in the property sector, and our vision is to change the landscape of property ownership within South Africa. So our focus is purely in South Africa, as opposed to other funds that have gone overseas. We've decided to focus all of our attention in South Africa only and supporting historically disadvantaged individuals. So, to jump straight into it, we will first talk about the property landscape and what that's made up of. And I would just like to apologize up front. I'm going to sort of shift to my side here where my notes are on occasion, just to refer to my notes. So bear with me as I flip screens and talk to you about this opportunity. So the first thing that I would like to talk about is the size of the property sector. There was a report 3 years ago that was put out by the Property Sector Charter Council that said that 5.8 trillion rand is the size of the property market. Now, just think about that for a second. A trillion is 12 zeros. And if we have a market of 5.8 trillion rand, clearly there's a space for everyone. There's lots of talk about land reform in this country, and it makes a lot of people nervous. But if you talk to me about it, I will hopefully be able to convince you that land reform is nothing to fear. Because in fact, regardless of what you hear in social media and even in the mainstream media, the land reform issue is actually not going to affect you to such a great extent that you will lose your property because if you've already developed your property, then there is no claim on your land. So if you'd like to talk to me about that, we can, but today is not about the land reform issue. Today is about you and building your property investment opportunity. So 5.8 trillion rand, that's the size of the industry. Within the 5.8 trillion, 3.8 trillion rand is specifically residential accommodation. Now, if the size of the residential property portfolio in South Africa is 3.8 trillion, and you own one property of R1 million, you have a very, very, very small percentage of that massive opportunity. However, you can, using your one opportunity, or even if you have nothing, you can start a much bigger portfolio using the methodology we hopefully will be able to teach you today. So of that 3.8 trillion rand, there are commercial property of 1.8 trillion as well, over and above the 3.8 trillion rand within the residential space. And there are others like industrial, commercial, retail, and other properties like farming and so on as well. But for you to start your property portfolio, my recommendation would always be start with residential because it's so much easier. And it's so much easier to get into. Okay, so how do you do it? let's go then. First of all, let's talk about why. If you are interested in property investment, you first need to understand why you would like to do it and why property investment would be such a lucrative investment opportunity. So there are a number of things like ownership, personal use for your home or your business, control of that asset, functional use, and there could be many functions, wealth creation, which is an important aspect, capital security and growth, and we'll talk about that a little bit in this webinar, continuous returns, which is phenomenal because every month you can collect rental income. But over and above that, you also have capital growth. So when you invest in a property, and let's say it's R1 million, every year you will have growth of that asset in value. And in South Africa, it can be anywhere, depending on where you're living, from say 1% all the way up to 15% sometimes in, say, for example, the Cape Town region. It is a major alternative to pension funds. So I want to tell you a little story of myself, my own stories. In fact, today, all the stories I'm going to tell you are stories that relate directly to me personally. So 15 years ago, in fact, 16 years now, in 2004, I quit a particular job at an institution. And at the time, I had a retirement annuity. The retirement annuity had 114,000 Rand in it. And at the time, obviously, 15, 16 years ago, that was a lot of money, especially for a young man who has come from the Cape Flats, very poor background, and have this cash sitting in a bank account. But unfortunately, I couldn't use it. Why? Because it was in a retirement annuity. And according to the receiver of revenue, I could not take out that money until I retire. Hence, retirement annuity. If I would take it out, and the earliest I could is 55, I'd pay some penalties to SARS. But at the time, I couldn't do so. In fact, today still, I cannot take out that money. So the money was at the time 114,000 Rand sitting in this retirement annuity. And last year, February, I received a statement from this institution. And they were so proud to tell me that my growth on this retirement annuity, which was 114,000, remember, in 2004, by 2019 had grown to a staggering amount of 125,000 Rand. Now, from 114 to 125,000 is 11,000 Rand growth in 15 years. That is less than 1% per annum. Now, if I had taken that money and I had invested it into property, and let's say I bought only one property of R1 million, I would go to the bank, and with my income at the time, I'd put the 100,000 Rand down. I'd even spend the other 14,000 on shoes, mostly for my wife probably. I would then take the other 100,000 Rand, put down a deposit of 100,000 Rand, ask the bank for 900,000 Rand, and buy a property of R1 million. That property by now would have been paid off. I'd be getting probably between 10 and 20,000 Rands worth of rental income per month. Now, bearing in mind that over 15 years, I only received 11,000 Rand. 10,000 Rand a month is a lot more income to receive on a property investment than it would have been in this retirement annuity. So 10,000 Rand a month minimum is what I would be receiving on a monthly basis with no debt because my bond would be paid up, and my asset would probably be worth anywhere between 1.5 and 2 million Rand. So therefore, my asset would have grown from 100,000, which was my initial investment, my deposit, to 1.5 million Rand, which would now be the value of my asset, and I'd be getting 10 to 20,000 Rand rental income per month. Now, personally, I would say that is a much better investment than a retirement annuity or a pension fund. So, to build a legacy for your family, to build a legacy for yourself, and to build wealth within your family unit, I would recommend that property, not the only one, but would be a very good investment to go into in order to create wealth for your family. Now, I would never recommend that you only invest in property. A very wise man once told me, you should put your money a third in property, a third in the equity markets, and a third in cash, so that you're always liquid. But property, for me personally, is my major investment. And whatever relates to property, I would then invest in that if I know that there's a good return on my investment. So, let's talk about the how. If we then go into a property opportunity, the very basic opportunity for anyone would be their own home. Now, most people would have that house and live in it, and it would be a sense of huge pride. For me personally also, if I live in a house that I own, it would be a sense of huge pride because it is mine, I own it, and I live in it, and it is beautiful. However, it doesn't only have to be a place to live. You could then, if you have a property and you've got some space in your backyard, for example, build a second unit. Now, in Cape Town, for example, the municipality allows you, because of the densification opportunities that they want to create, they allow you now to build 3 units on a parcel of land, on one earth. Other municipalities will allow 2, but in Cape Town specifically, they allow you 3 units. You could then put 2 units in Cape Town, or 2 or 1 extra in any other municipality, and gain a rental income on a monthly basis to supplement your own income. Yesterday, I was speaking with an individual who had built, with the help of some investors, had built a unit on her property. She personally earns 6,000 Rand a month as a domestic worker. However, from the investment that she's made in the property, she earns 20,000 Rand a month. Now, just think about that for a second. You earn in your job 6,000 Rand a month, but your investment, you are gaining an additional 20,000 Rand a month because this lady was wise enough to find an opportunity to build a unit and be able to rent that out, and she rents a number of rooms in that unit. You can also do the same. And we'll also talk today about how to then raise the capital in order to do so. Now, a friend of mine, Anton, the CEO of Empire Wealth, he runs a program and he wrote a book called The 15 Proven Ways to Raise Capital for Your Property Investment. And today we'll talk about that as well. So if you do not have the money to do what I've just said, or invest in a property portfolio over and above just having your own property in your backyard, there are ways for you to raise capital in order for you to then build a property portfolio more than just the property that you live in. All right, the next thing is to understand the ways to invest in property. Now, there are many, many ways to invest in property. Today, we're only going to talk about the key aspects. The first one is to become a developer. Now, there are 3 very basic ways in which to become a developer. You can build to rent. So you're building, you own it, and you rent it out. You can build to sell, which means then that after you've done your development, you will then sell all of the units within that development. Or you can build to own, which basically means you then become the operator inside that particular development that you've done. So those are the 3 different development opportunities. You can also, in exactly the same way, invest to own, invest to sell, or invest to rent. Now, invest to sell today has become sort of the go-to way to invest in property. They also term it or call it flipping. And when you talk to property investors, a lot of the guys today are talking about flip deals. And what that means is that you invest in a property, you give it a bit of a spit and a polish in terms of painting, doing a bit of renovations. You'll maybe replace the bathroom, you'll maybe replace the kitchen, do some tiling, and then sell it for a profit. This is a risky way to invest, but it is quite high value in terms of returns. And as with any investment, the higher the risk, the higher the potential for return. The lower the risk, the lower the potential for return. So I personally am a medium risk, medium return type person, but I invest for the long term. So I would then typically, when I purchase or develop a property, I would then purchase for rental. So I would own it and I would rent it out to my tenants. That is my long-term strategy, but you possibly would want to do it differently. You would maybe want to do some cash flow things like the flipping deals, but at the same time also building a long-term property portfolio for rental. There are other ways to invest. Stokvels are one of them. The EDPF, for example, has a stokvel called the EDPF Property Stokvel. You could invest in a stokvel, and that is what they call a collective property investment scheme. You with a bunch of other people come together. You monthly put money into this investment scheme called a stokvel, and then collectively you would invest in property opportunities. There are other ways to do the same thing where you could also put money in on a once-off basis. You could then create a company, and that company could invest in property opportunities. The other ways that you could invest are things like buying shares in unlisted or listed portfolios. There are property syndications, unit trusts, loan stocks, and real estate investment stocks on the stock exchange. This has, over the past few years, been the most lucrative and most exciting way to invest. But as most of you have seen over the last 2 or 3 years, most of the REITs have started to pay much lower dividends. In fact, in some cases have stopped paying dividends, and their share prices have dropped quite significantly. So most investors have now gone back to the direct investment model, which is today what we are talking about. So in terms of your investment model, one of the main concerns of most people is the lack of finance. And there's a term that goes, a lack of access to money should never prevent you from securing that good property investment deal that you found. Anton, in his book 15 Ways, quotes that quite a lot. And I personally like to encourage people that a lack of finance should never stop you from your property investment. So how do you go about becoming a property investor? First thing you need to do is to create a structure. Never get involved in a property investment opportunity unless you've got a proper structure. I personally, and I'm not saying you should do this exactly the same way, I would recommend you get a professional team around you so that you can then create the correct structure for yourself. My structure is such. I have a company, a property company, which does all the investment and owns all the property. The ownership of that company is a trust, because the trust is the way to safeguard myself and my family if anything should go wrong. The trust members, the trustees, and the beneficiaries are myself, a few independents like my accountant and my lawyer, and my beneficiaries are my family. That's the way I've structured my portfolio, but you could structure yours differently depending on your portfolio needs, your legacy needs, as well as the advice of your counsel, your legal team, and your accounting and tax practitioners. I would recommend that you get a tax practitioner especially to structure your deal in such a way that it is tax efficient. The next step is to then find your first deal. Now, there are lots of deals out there. In today's market, it is a buyer's market. I would recommend that everybody start taking advantage of the fact that it is a buyer's market right now. Sellers are desperate and buyers have plenty of deals to look at. So you could then negotiate a very, very good deal at a low price, regardless of what the seller wants. In general, over the years, I have found that sellers always ask for way more than what their property is really worth. You need to do your assessment. You need to look at what your returns are going to be, and then you need to make an offer based on the type of yields or returns that you personally will want from your portfolio. and then make your offer accordingly. If the seller says no, then you move on to the next deal, because there are many, many deals out there. The next step then is to do your due diligence or your feasibility. Now, the difference between a due diligence and a feasibility is a due diligence is when you're buying a property that already exists and there is already probably rental income coming from that property portfolio. So you would then analyze who owns the property, whether the seller actually is the owner, and you'll be so surprised to find how many people are trying to sell property that they don't actually own. Make sure that the person selling the property actually owns it. So you do your due diligence, understanding who the property owner is. Number two, if there's a rental income, you need to understand the lease agreement, whether that lease agreement is transferable to you, the new owner, whether that rental income is enough to cover the bond that you have, and also making sure that the expenses on the property don't exceed the amount of the rental income, especially, number one. And number two, that the net income then, after taking off your expenses, is still enough to cover your bond and give you a cash flow. Always make sure that your property is cash flow positive from day one. Otherwise, what will happen is that you will have to then cover the difference. So if, for example, your rental income is 5,000 Rand, your expenses is 1,000, you then have a net income of 4,000 Rand, but your bond is 5,500 Rand. You then have to put in 1,500 Rand personally every month. The best way to invest in property is where you find a deal where the net income will cover your bond for repayment and there's still some cash flow left over for yourself every month. That's the best type of deal. Okay, so once you've done your due diligence, on that you can then start investing and looking for your finance. A feasibility, however, is where there's a property development opportunity. So even if there is a rental income, or if it's just a parcel of land or a property that is derelict that you want to revamp, you then need to do a feasibility to make sure that once the property development is done, that the sale of that property or the rental income will be enough to cover the cost of the bond and give you a profit at the end of the day. That is the difference then in terms of a feasibility study, that when you do one, you make sure that your income exceeds the expenses to give you a profit in the future, not in the present. So, to recap, a due diligence is more in the present, where there's already a rental income. A feasibility is a development opportunity that will give you a rental income in the future. Okay, now, the most critical part, finding the money. So, like I have alluded to, my friend Anton wrote this book, 15 Ways. I would recommend you get the book. It only costs 200 Rand. Because there he outlines all of what I'm about to tell you. So I'm going to just give you the basics and the 15 different ways, but in order to understand them, I would recommend you get that book. So these 15 ways, and you will see a slide coming up now that will show you the 15 ways. And these 15 ways are, number one, a bank loan. You could get a bank loan from the bank. Now, you would think there are only 4 banks, but actually there's over 50 banks in this country that can give you a loan. Do some research and you will find out who they are. Number 2, bank security. Now, this is similar to a bank loan. In fact, it is a bank loan, but you do not put the security down. Somebody else, a family member, an equity partner, someone else puts down the security for the loan because you personally do not have security of your own. Number 3, personal credit. Now here I would caution very, very carefully that you do not use personal credit unless the return on the investment way outstrips the repayment on the personal credit. Now, personal credit could be a credit card, it could be a personal loan, it could even be an extension of a facility that you have on your car, for example. Any kind of other credit other than a bond that you could use, but only for the short term, to do a quick flip deal, for example, where you take that money, you invest it into an opportunity, and within a few months, you then get the money back and you can pay up that short-term loan. But make sure that the interest you're going to pay is way exceeds the profit you're going to make. So be very careful where it comes to personal credit. Number 3, equity gearing. Now this is a complicated one, and again, I'd recommend the book explains everything, or you could just Google it. What is equity gearing? Somebody puts money into your property investment opportunity. You then gear that money in order to then raise capital from a loan. So for example, I have one of my students who is buying a property portfolio of 70 million rand. He has gotten one of the banks to support him with 40 million rand, but on the basis that he brings 30 million rand in equity. He has now, through our help with the Enterprise Development Property Fund, received support from 3 individuals who are going to put in the 30 million rand equity. So they've now taken the 30 million rand, geared it, and received 40 million rand from the bank to make up the 70 million rand. And next week they are going to put in the offer for the 70 million rand portfolio, which has a yield of 11% and a bond at only 9.5%, 0.25% below prime currently. So that's an exciting deal because there's some cash flow in it for both the guy who's brought the deal as well as the investors. Okay, so the next one is asset finance. Now with asset finance, which for me is my favorite one, is where you have an asset, a property for example. In fact, it's the best example. You then go to the bank and you say, my bond is 500,000, but actually the asset is worth 1 million. You then take that asset, you rebond it, take the cash out, you take that 500,000 rand in cash and go and invest in other properties. So you could then, with a property of 1 million, where your bond is only 500,000, create a portfolio of as much as 5 million rand. If you take the 500,000 cash and invest it as a deposit and get 4 million or 4.5 million rand bond to create a 5 million rand portfolio. So you can see the exponential growth that you could use in terms of a property or asset and the leverage that you have in the asset value to then create a much bigger property portfolio. So asset finance for me is my favorite one. The next one's partnerships. Now I'm going to cite an example, a real life example of myself and my partners where we've come together, we found a deal, and with a partnership putting money in, raising development capital, have been able to, within a period of 2 years, take a 1.8 million rand investment and turn it into a 10 million rand asset, which if we sell it, we could make easily about 2.5 to 3 million rand profit. So partnerships can be very, very lucrative if you bring other people on board as friends, family, as partners into your business in order to raise capital. The next one is seller finance. Now this is a very interesting one because here basically what you're doing is you're saying to a seller, I want to buy your property, and I personally have done this, so I know it can work. Telling a seller that he must give you money to buy the property from him. Now that sounds amazing, and yes it is. You could say to a seller, stay in for a while, fund me for a portion of the deal. I will raise the capital from the bank and partners and so on for the balance of the money. And you stay in as a seller, and they call it either seller finance or vendor finance. Obviously, they would want some kind of return from that money, and you would then commit to a certain interest amount, and for a very short period of time, maybe 3 years. At which time, you may have been able to pay up some of the capital and then refinance what that amount of money is within the seller finance package. The next one is owner finance. Now, the difference between seller finance and owner finance is that with seller finance, they're effectively financing you in the deal by lending you money, albeit not in actual cash, but in a portion of the property. With owner finance, what you do there is you leverage the property, you develop it while the owner still has control of the property, and then at a later stage sell it without having to raise a bond yourself, except the capital you require for the development. Once you then have sold it, you and the owner then share in the profits. So the difference then between seller finance is that you take ownership within the seller finance model, but with owner finance, the owner keeps the asset in his or her name, and you then develop and sell it, and you both share in the profits. The next one is venture capital. Now, venture capital, in the main, venture capitalists will only come on board if you already have a business that is running, and at very least about 3 years where you've already started to make profits, but you want to now scale your business. And venture capitalists are basically people who will take other people's money, fund managers, they'll take banks' money, and they will take pension fund money and private investors and so on. And that money will then be utilized into new ventures like your business, which would then be a property business. They would then invest as an equity partner. You would lend money from the bank, and you would then be able to scale your business and build a much bigger property portfolio. The next one is private finance. Now, the difference between venture capital finance and private finance is that within private finance, they are mostly family-owned funds. And in this package, you would then be able to raise money through these family funds, mostly home-run funds, but you also find funds that are run by external managers, but they are family funds. So it's personal, and in these cases, you normally have that family or that individual be part of the business, whereas with venture capitalists, they don't want to run your business, they don't want to be part of your business, they just want a return on their investment, hence the difference between the two. The next one is angel finance. Now, angel finance is where you go to people and say, I've got a great deal, a great idea, come and invest with me as an angel investor. That's somebody, and as the name would suggest, who is an angel who wants to invest into social investment projects, etc., etc. Somebody who likes you, somebody who believes in you, somebody who is able to invest into your opportunity purely because they believe in you and in your idea. The next one is family. Now, for most, this is probably the easiest way to raise capital. If your family trusts you, of course. So, most people would normally go to family and say, I've got an idea, I need 100,000 Rand, I'm going to raise the balance of the money from the bank, or come and help me and be my surety so that I can raise the capital through the bank to become a property investor. It's the easiest way, because if your family do trust you and they believe in what you're doing, they would be able to come together and invest into your opportunity. The next one is a very interesting one. Rent to rent. Now, there's a chap that's on the circuit, the property talk shows and so on, that regularly talks about his seaboard investments, where he takes other people's property, rents them out. He actually pays the rental on a monthly basis, and he then rents them out to holiday makers and the like through things like Airbnb, for example, and then generates additional income on a monthly basis. And the difference between what he raises through the rentals and what he pays over to the landlord is his profit. So a rent-to-rent model. Now, that's fascinating, but it can also be very risky, because if you cannot fill the space, you are still obliged to pay the rental. There is a way, however, to circumvent that and to cut the risk, where you go to the landlord and you say to the landlord, I will rent out your property on your behalf. I'm not going to pay you a rental, but we share in the profit over and above what it is you want. So, for example, if he requires 20,000 Rand, for example, as a rental income, and through Airbnb you can make that 30, you then share the upside of 10,000 Rand with that particular property landlord. And that's the way you can do it without having to carry any of the risk yourself. So there are two different ways that you can do the rent-to-rent model. Now, probably the most fascinating one is the rent-to-buy one. Rent-to-buy is a unique opportunity for people who want to buy property between 400,000 and 1.8 million Rand. And there are many funds out there, most notably Meyer de Waal's fund called I Rent to Buy. You can go to their website, you can Google that, I Rent to Buy. And basically what this opportunity gives you is where you, if you cannot raise the capital because the banks will not lend you money, you can rent a property over a 2-year period, And then during those 2 years, create a profile that will then be able to give you the ability to get a bond. And what they do is they will lend you the money through a rental scheme where you pay them a rent as opposed to a bond over a 2-year period while you're building your profile. After the 2 years, if your profile is then strong enough, they will then give you the property or sell the property to you at a negotiated price at the beginning of the deal. So 2 years later, you're paying a price that you originally would have paid 2 years prior. And you can then go to the bank to get a traditional bond on that asset. So the rent to buy model, probably the most exciting one. Okay, so those are the different aspects and the ways that you can raise money. And in fact, there are many others, but those are the most important ones. And you can look up any other way to raise capital. There are many, many ways. Okay, so what do you need to do and how do you structure this thing? So you'll see now another slide coming up, and it will show you a deal that two friends of mine and myself in a partnership and in collaboration have put together. So you see that piece of land. There was a house on it. We bought it for 1.8 million rand. We then subdivided it into 4. You'll see there numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. We then put a plan of action in place where we drew up plans with our architects and our town planner. We went to the municipality, got the approvals to build 4 units and put a road in between, enclose it with a fence and a gate for access, security gate for access. And within a period of 2.5 years, we are now at a point where we will hopefully break ground in a few weeks' time and sell that property for approximately 10 million rand. So 2.5 million rand per site. Now, if you take the 1.8 million rand that we've invested originally, plus approximately 5 million rand, just over 5 million rand that we've invested and we got from the bank, in fact, as development finance, we then, through the partnership, putting cash in at 1.8, the bank's finance, the development finance of 5 million plus, we then made a profit of about 2.5, almost 3 million rand from an initial investment of only 1.8 million. So if you take that and you say, I had no money, I brought a deal, I brought 2 partners on board with cash, I leveraged their equity, I got funding from the bank, I then did the development, and now we are ready to sell, and we collectively have made a profit of almost 3 million rand. That is the way you take a piece of land and you make it profitable as an investment opportunity if you want to do developments. Now, if we didn't want to do that, what we could have done is we could have taken that property, maybe do a bit of a spit and a polish, as I've said, put 2 more units on it, because the municipality allows us to do that for densification purposes, and then rent out those other 2 units. We could get the money from the bank as a bond, so we didn't have to put in additional capital, and then with that, create enough income to pay back our bond and actually have some cash flow for ourselves. So 2 different models of how you could use one parcel of land to make money off it. So you could then do exactly the same with your parcel of land. So how do you get started? The first thing you need to do after you've now created your structure is build a team. Now that team will consist of a number of people. You'll need an architect, a quantity surveyor, a town planner, a builder, which is NHBRC approved. Remember that, NHBRC approved. You do not want a builder that is not approved, because if anything goes wrong, you have nowhere to claim. The NHBRC assures you that if your builder is registered with them, if anything goes wrong, you are insured against any problems. You need a land surveyor, a transport and or a traffic engineer, an attorney, a financial advisor, insurance broker, potentially a green consultant, somebody who will look at the development, if it's a development, to see whether you are carbon neutral in your building, because that's one of the requirements nowadays, that we need to look at our carbon footprint. That law has now been enacted in Parliament. And then you also need a financier, somebody who's going to put in the money. Now, we've just spoken about the 15 ways to raise capital. You could use any combination of those. I, for example, have used in my previous example, partnerships, leveraging equity, and raising money for the development through a bond. So you could use any one of those or a combination of the different methodologies to raise the money to do your development or investment. So now you've got your team, you have structured your portfolio, and you even put together a financing team, including your bank and other individuals. What's the next step? Finding that first deal. Now, it may sound easy, but it's not. Because most sellers, as I said before, want more than what their property is worth. And in order for you to really gain anything out of the investment, there needs to be a good return on that investment. And by the time a seller wants to sell, it is already too late. By the time that property comes onto the market on one of the platforms, it is already too late. So you need to find a deal before a broker gets their hand on it or the broker puts it onto a platform to sell. So how do you do that? First of all, educate yourself. Make sure that you understand the market. Make sure that you understand the area in which you want to invest. Make sure that you know the people, the brokers, the lawyers, the accountants who deal in the property sector in the market that you want to attack. But more importantly than that, first of all, make sure that you understand the goals that you want to achieve. Write them down somewhere. Where do you want to go with this property portfolio? What is the reason why you want to invest in property? Write that goal down. Make it prominent wherever you are. I personally put it on my laptop, my phone, my desk, my office, every wall. When I wake up in the morning, it's on my mirror, in my bathroom, it's in my kitchen. My goal being changing the landscape of property ownership patterns in this country is prominent wherever I go. And I would suggest you do the same. Whatever your goal is, make sure that it is everywhere, that every day, every minute of the day, you see it so that you can remind yourself of what your goal is. Then you need to educate yourself. Make sure that you learn. There are many, many platforms. There are thousands of books. There are hundreds of incubators and academies that you can attend. There are places like SAPN, Enterprise Development Property Fund, EPIC, Empire Wealth, and many others where you can go to receive education on how to build a property portfolio. And once you've built your team, you've got your financing, and you start looking for those deals, you can become a property investor. Now, in order to find those deals, you need to build a good network or a circle of people who are going to bring you good deals. And how you do that is where there's a quid pro quo. People aren't going to bring you good deals if they don't get something out of it. Number one, obviously, they'll get commission on that first deal. But if a broker brings a good deal to you and you make some good money, you can then take that property opportunity and give it back to them to resell. That will then create that relationship where the broker, the real estate agent, then believes or trusts you and says, if I bring Nigel a deal, he will, when he wants to sell it, give it back to me and I can make commission again. And that's how you create a relationship with a real estate agent or a broker, is you build that trust that if you put in an offer also, that it's not a spurious offer, that you're not going to say, here's an offer but never perform. Make sure that when you make an offer, you perform, that you raise the capital, that the deal goes through. Because if you do 2 or 3 deals with a broker and none of them have worked, that broker will never bring you a deal again. So make sure that if you're going to put in an offer, that you can actually raise the capital for that offer. The next thing is, do not follow the sheep. If you follow where everybody else is going, you will never make any money. If in the bad market, when everybody else is selling, you are also selling, you'll never make money. When everybody is buying and you are also buying, you never make money. The Warren Buffett methodology is to buy when everybody else is selling. When everybody else is running for the hills, you stop and you then go into the market. Currently, we are in a buyer's market, as I've said. And for now, while this buyer's market is available, you can pick up properties at a much, much reduced price. And make no mistake, this property market will turn. And when it turns, the people who have come in now will make quite a bit of money, because when the sheep come back to the market, they will want to buy those very properties that they sold now. They will want to buy it back because it's making good money. So don't be a sheep. Don't follow the crowd. Buy property when everybody else is running, because that's when you pick up really good deals. So the next thing is to make sure that you have a property mentor. Many people fail because they don't have somebody that's going to guide them in their program or their building of their property portfolio. If you have a property mentor that's been there, has burnt the t-shirts, has paid school fees, the school of hard knocks. If you have somebody like that in your life, they will help you to navigate the perils of the property sector. And make no mistake, there are many perils. You could easily lose your shirt. I personally have lost my shirt a few times because I've made the wrong investment choices. So find somebody that can mentor you, that can take you and guide you through the property perils so that you do not make the same mistakes. A property mentor is very important. Then most importantly, be patient. You will hear a lot of talk in the industry at the moment about making money quickly in the property sector, becoming an instant millionaire using property as an investment tool. If you want to become wealthy, or you want to build wealth, or you want to build a legacy in the property sector, my advice, over 20 years of experience in this industry, is to be patient. 10 years is the minimum time I would suggest for you to really start making money in property. Don't think that you're going to make massive amounts of money from day one. You would want to be cash flow positive, but not make massive amounts of money upfront. 10 years is the amount of time that it's going to take you to build a substantial property portfolio and really start building some good wealth. So that's what I would suggest. Be patient, find yourself a good mentor, raise the capital, build a good team, create your structure, and you also will be successful. So now, to round off, I want to use a very basic and practical example for something that you can take home and use as a property investment model to build a good portfolio. So you earn 30,000 Rand a month. Your net income is, say, 23,000 Rand. Your expenses are, say, 18,000 Rand, if you are very conservative, and you have about 5,000 Rands worth of net cash flow every month, if you don't squander your money on cigarettes and alcohol and partying. You then take that 5,000 Rand, put it away. Stick it into an investment somewhere, a stokvel, whatever. If you can, in a stokvel, bring a bunch of other people together. Bring 20 of your friends who can potentially do the same. Put your money away every month. Now you've put in 5,000 Rand a month. Over 10 months or 12 months, you've built a capital base of about 50,000 to 60,000 Rand. You then take that money, you go to the bank, you say, I've got this money, what do I qualify in terms of a bond? The bank will most likely say, well, with a 10% deposit, you can qualify for a 450,000 Rand bond, which gives you 500,000 Rand capital to work with. You then go and you look for a property worth 500,000 Rand. So you invest in that property, and most likely you'll be able to get a rental income of just over 5,000 Rand then. Your bond will be about 4.5. If there are levies, it will probably be about 400 to 500 Rand, which then means that you have a positive cash flow of a few hundred Rand, hopefully. Bearing in mind now, you still have your 5,000 Rand every month that you're getting from your salary, right? But you're now also getting a rental income, which you can use to pay your bond. So now, after another 10 or 12 months, you've got another 50,000 or 60,000 Rand. You then take that 50 or 60,000 Rand, you go back to the bank, but not the same bank. You go to a different bank and you say, I've got this money, I'd like a bond because I've got another deal. They then give you another bond of 450,000, you do the same. Now this is about a year later. So in 2 years, you could then have a property portfolio of R1 million with a net cash flow, possibly of 0, but your 2 bonds are being paid through your rental income. Over and above that, you still have your 5,000 Rand a month that you get from your net income. Now, yes, it means that you'll have to live a bit frugally for a period of time, But imagine the kind of power that that will give you in terms of a property portfolio. I would suggest to you that then after 10 years, if you do one of these deals, just one, every year, you would then have a property portfolio of 5 million rand with capital growth and a net income on a 5 million rand portfolio, probably about 500,000 rand income per year. Now, if you were earning 30,000 rand a month, your net income was then 360,000, and with your increases every year, you probably by that stage would be on about maybe 400,000 to 500,000 rand. By this stage, if your cash flow is positive enough and you've worked with your money wisely, you could then retire on your rental income and give up your job in 10 years' time by purely investing in one property per year. Now, I would go even further to say that after a few years, let's say 3 to 5 years, the first properties that you've invested in would have grown in value. You could then go back to the bank, and with the income you have from your rental incomes, from your salary, go to the bank and say, these properties have now grown in value. Leverage those properties, take the equity, as I said in my 15 ways, or in Anton's 15 ways, leveraging your property, your asset, and then raising additional capital in order to invest and accelerate your property portfolio. You could then, over a period of 10 years, grow your portfolio to much more than 5 million rand. And in that way, over a period of time, build quite a massive portfolio. Now, if you talk to any multimillionaire or even billionaire in the world, you will find that most of them have built their wealth on the back of property using a similar methodology. You too, using this methodology, can then build your own property portfolio. Maybe not become a multi-millionaire or a billionaire, but at least build a property portfolio that will build a legacy and a retirement annuity that you can retire on. Thank you very much for listening to me. This is Nigel Adriaanse of the Enterprise Development Property Fund, signing off.